There's a peculiar kind of stillness that settles in the aftermath of a heartbreak, not the explosive, theatrical silence seen in films with yelling and fists pounding walls. The silence is different. It's quiet, eerie, and hollow, creeping into your bones when you come to terms with the fact that the person you loved was never truly yours. That night, I found myself sitting alone in my car, my fingers wrapped tightly around a small velvet box. It weighed far more than it should have, as if it carried the burden of all the unkept promises she once made. Overhead, the streetlights flickered, their glow stretching shadows across the asphalt. My eyes were fixed on the bar's neon sign, glowing in the dark. I could hear her laugh from outside. That familiar, carefree sound once reserved for me now belonged to someone else. Him. It wasn't as if I hadn't seen it coming. The warning signs had been there for quite a while, late nights out, distant eyes, and how quickly she'd lock her phone screen the moment I entered the room. I ignored them all, telling myself that love required patience, that trust meant working through doubts. But even the strongest heart has its limits. Clutching the ring box a little tighter, I let out a slow, deliberate breath. I faced a choice. I could walk in, demand answers, and let my emotions erupt. Or I could do something unexpected. I turned the ignition key, feeling the soft rumble of the engine. Then, with a strange sense of calm I didn't know I possessed, I pulled away from the curb. She had no clue what was about to unfold. I had always pictured the end of a relationship as something loud, something unmistakable, an argument, a confession, or a dramatic goodbye. But this was quiet. It unfolded slowly, like mist settling over everything, as I drove away, still holding the engagement ring in my palm. Sure, I could have stormed in and caused a scene, but what would that have changed? She had already made her choice. I drove without direction, letting the city blur past. My mind swirled with memories, every whispered, "I love you," every tender touch in the dark. Were those moments genuine? Had her feelings shifted over time, or had she always been this person and I just refused to acknowledge it? Eventually, I pulled into the driveway of what used to be our apartment. Now it was hers. Sitting in the car, I stared at the door, feeling like a stranger at my own front step. When I finally went inside, the familiar scent of lavender candles hit me, her favorite. It used to comfort me, now it made my stomach churn. I walked to the bedroom without hesitation, opened the drawer where I kept my belongings, and reached for a duffel bag. In under 10 minutes, I packed only what mattered, some clothes, my toothbrush, and a few photographs I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. The rest? She could keep it all. But before stepping out, I did one final thing. I placed the engagement ring gently on the nightstand beside a framed photo of us from the previous Christmas. In that picture, she was curled up in my arms, beaming like I was her entire world. I didn't feel rage or sorrow, just a deep, soul-level fatigue. Then I left. 2 hours passed before the message came through. "Hey babe, I just got home. Where are you? I thought we were gonna watch something tonight." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. She had no idea. Everything she thought she was keeping hidden had already unraveled. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. If she wanted to play games, then fine. Let's see how she handles the one I was about to begin. Parked in a quiet lot just outside the city, I reread her message again. "Hey babe, I just got home. Where are you? I thought we were gonna watch something tonight." I nearly laughed. The audacity of it all. Pretending like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been out with someone else. Like our relationship was still intact. But it wasn't, not anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, letting the weight of it all wash over me. Walking away was supposed to be the hardest step, right? But if that was true, why were my hands trembling? Why did it feel like my chest was caving in with every breath? I had no plan, nowhere specific to go, just the overwhelming need to leave that apartment behind. My best friend, Joel, lived on the other side of town. I knew he'd welcome me without question, but I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. Not tonight. So I kept driving. Slowly. With no destination in mind, just moving forward enough to avoid being swallowed by my thoughts. The streets were empty, bathed in the orange glow of streetlights that cast long shadows across the windshield as I passed underneath them. The night carried an eerie stillness, as if the entire world had momentarily gone silent, the city itself holding its breath. My phone buzzed again. This time it was her calling. I let it ring unmoved. It rang over and over until it finally slipped to voicemail. Though I didn't answer, I could almost hear her confusion bleeding through the silence. She knew something wasn't right. Good. Let that uncertainty settle in. But that wasn't the end of it. Moments later, another message lit up the screen. "Are you okay? You're not answering. I'm getting worried." Worried, how ironic. I pulled into a vacant gas station, its bright lights casting a sterile glow around me, and picked up my phone. Each word of my response was deliberate, typed out with care. I left something for you on the nightstand. I had sinned. Almost instantly, the screen showed the familiar typing bubbles. Then they vanished. Then reappeared. She was hesitating, taking it all in. She hadn't entered the bedroom yet. I could almost see her frozen in the doorway, heart thumping as she suddenly rushed to the nightstand. Once she saw the ring, the truth would strike with brutal clarity, and I wouldn't be there to soften it. I didn't wait for her reply. I powered down the phone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had taken control, and she was the one left wondering in the dark. That first night apart should have tasted like freedom. No more lies, no more facades, no more pretending everything was fine. But instead, as I sat alone in a rundown motel room, eyes fixed on the stained ceiling, it felt hollow. I had spent the past few hours behind the wheel, driving aimlessly as the roads blurred into one another, trying to process everything that had unfolded. My rational mind told me I had made the right call. Walking away from someone who had betrayed me, what else was there to do? It was the only decision that made any kind of sense. But logic didn't soothe the ache in my chest or the pit in my stomach. I wasn't grieving over her. I was grieving the future I thought we were building. The motel was as uninspired as they come. Dull carpeting, flickering lights, and a faint trace of old cigarette smoke clinging to the air. I didn't mind. All I needed was a place to breathe, to think, to be on my own. I tossed my duffel bag onto the bed and took a seat at the small table by the window. The clock had just passed 2 in the morning. My phone, still off, lay face down in front of me. By now, I knew she'd seen the ring. I could envision the moment. Her walking into the bedroom, expecting nothing out of the ordinary, and then spotting that small velvet box beside her framed photo. Would confusion strike first? Likely. Would panic follow? Almost certainly. And would she understand that I knew everything? Absolutely. Still, I wasn't ready to turn my phone back on. Not yet. I sat in silence, memories playing like a film in my mind. The laughs, the shared plans, the peaceful mornings that once felt so genuine. The way she used to look at me, as if I were her whole universe. Then, the recent months came to the forefront. The late nights, the excuses, her secretive smiles at her phone that instantly disappeared when I walked in. The kisses that felt distant, like they belonged to someone else before they reached me. I had seen the signs. I just didn't want to admit what they meant. Accepting them would have meant facing the reality that the woman I had fallen in love with was gone. That truth was the hardest to face. Not the lies, not the betrayal, but the recognition that the person I thought I knew had vanished. A knock at the door interrupted the spiral of thoughts. I froze. No one knew where I was. My first instinct was to ignore it, but another knock followed, louder and more deliberate. Slowly, I got up, heart starting to race as I approached the door. I looked through the peephole, half expecting a stranger, maybe a motel worker, or someone who got the wrong room. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Joel. I sighed and unlocked the door. You planning to let me in, or should we continue this little reunion in the hallway? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I stepped aside, letting him enter. He glanced around, taking in the dim surroundings before turning to me. Seriously? A motel? You really just left? I nodded, wiping a hand down my face. Yeah. Joel let out a slow breath and sat on the edge of the bed. All right, start from the beginning. So I did. For the first time since walking out, I let it all spill out. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the end. It was just the start. Joel listened without interrupting as I recounted everything. The time I sat parked outside the bar, watching her laugh with another man like I didn't even exist. The aimless driving, the ring left behind, the choice to silence my phone just to escape hearing her voice. When I finished, he didn't say anything at first. He just shook his head slowly. Man, I don't even know what to say. Yeah, I mumbled, leaning back in the chair, feeling utterly drained. It was as if every emotion had been squeezed out of me, leaving nothing but fatigue behind. Joel paused, then asked quietly, "You want my honest opinion?" A dry, joyless laugh escaped me. "Not really," I said. "But I doubt that's going to stop you anyway." He gave a knowing smirk, though it faded into a more serious expression almost instantly. "You did the right thing by leaving," he told me. "You know that, right?" I let out a long breath. "Do I? Because right now, it feels like I've abandoned my life, and she's just out there, continuing hers like nothing ever happened." Joel rubbed his jaw, studying me for a beat. "Yeah, I get that. Feels unfair. But think about this. If you had stayed, if you had confronted her, what would that have looked like?" I didn't respond right away. I honestly didn't know. Would she have denied everything? Broken down in tears? Tried to make me out to be the villain? Possibly. Or maybe she would have confessed, laid out every lie, and made me realize just how long I'd been played. No matter how it played out, the ending would have been the same. "Listen," Joel said, leaning in a little. "Leaving like you did, that's strength. She probably expected you to explode, to scream, to beg, maybe even cry. She thought you'd fall apart. But you didn't give her that satisfaction. Now she's the one sitting around, wondering what happens next." That image gave me my first taste of relief in what felt like forever. Joel rested his elbows on his knees, watching me closely. "So what now? You planning to stay holed up here forever?" I shook my head. "No. I just needed some space to clear my thoughts. I'm not running. I just couldn't be in a place that was tied to us." Joel nodded approvingly. "Good. Because you know she's going to reach out again. And when she does, you'll have to deal with it." I knew he was right. I could ignore the messages, reject her calls, delay the inevitable. But eventually, I'd have to face it all. Just as that realization settled in, my phone vibrated. My heart skipped, but it wasn't from her. It was an email from my bank. My brow furrowed as I unlocked the screen. The subject line hit me like a punch to the chest. "Withdrawal alert, $4,500 approved." "What the?" I mumbled, bolting upright. Joel immediately noticed my shift. "What's going on?" I opened the message and scanned it quickly. It was from the joint account we had built together over the years, meant for our wedding, our honeymoon, our future plans. But now, nearly $5,000 had disappeared. And I didn't need to ask who had taken it. I flipped back through my phone, opening the texts I had ignored. And there it was. "Orson, I don't know what's happening, but we need to talk. Please call me." I clenched my jaw, steadying my breath. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was stealing. And I wasn't just walking away this time. I was ready to reclaim what was mine. There are rare moments in life when something clicks. When grief, sorrow, and confusion fall away, revealing only certainty. Cold, unwavering, fierce certainty. And that was where I found myself now. I stared at the phone, the numbers blurring in my vision. $4,500. Gone in a blink. Money I had worked overtime for, skipped vacations to save, cut corners in my budget. All because I believed in the life we were building. And she had just taken it, as if it were hers, as if I didn't matter at all. My fists tightened until my knuckles cracked. Joel was watching me carefully. "All right, what's going on? You look like you're about to..." He stopped mid-sentence, then gave a slow nod. "It's her, isn't it?" His voice barely registered. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, a storm churning just beneath the surface. I had chosen to walk away, to preserve my dignity, to be the bigger person. And she couldn't even wait a full day before clawing at my savings like I was just some wallet to empty. I pulled in a breath, then another. Then I stood. Joel looked up. "Where are you going?" "To get back what's mine." I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the motel, ignoring Joel's voice calling after me. He caught up as I reached my car. "Wait, man. Think about this. Don't do something reckless." I spun around. "She took from me, Joel. That money was meant for both of us. She had no right." Joel exhaled sharply. "I get that, I really do. But what's your plan? You gonna storm in there and demand she return it?" You really think she'll just hand over thousands of dollars because you ask nicely? That made me pause. Of course she wouldn't. But I wasn't about to play nice. I flung open the car door and slid into the driver's seat. Joel hesitated for a beat before climbing in beside me. If this turns into a train wreck, he muttered. I'm not missing it. The drive to what used to be our apartment blurred past. My grip on the wheel was firm, and for the first time in weeks, my thoughts were crystal clear. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When we arrived, her car was parked in front. Good. She was home. I stepped out of the car, filled my lungs with air, and headed for the front door. Joel followed a few steps behind, keeping a cautious distance. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, this time with more force. Footsteps followed. A brief pause, then the door creaked open just slightly. There she was, Ariella. Her wide eyes, pale complexion, and disheveled appearance told me everything. She looked drained, her hair a mess, makeup smudged, and she wore one of my old hoodies like she'd forgotten it no longer belonged to her. Her voice was barely audible. Orson. You came. I leaned on the doorframe, arms folded. Yeah. Surprised? Mind letting me inside? She hesitated, the uncertainty written all over her face. I don't think that's such a good idea. My smile didn't reach my eyes. All right, I'll make this simple. Give me back my money. She inhaled sharply, clearly caught off guard. What? Tilting my head slightly, I stared her down. Don't play innocent, Ariella. $4,500 vanished from our shared account. My account. Got any good explanations for that? Her lips moved, but no sound came. For the first time, I saw something new flicker across her face, fear. Not of me, but of her own actions. I was going to, she began, swallowing hard, her voice unsteady. I meant to tell you, Save it, I interrupted, letting out a long breath as I shook my head. I just want my money back. She turned her face away from me. I can't. A bitter laugh escaped me, low and sharp. You can't. She gave a nervous glance to Joel standing behind me like she hoped he could somehow intervene. Then she met my eyes again. It's gone, she said, barely above a whisper. I froze. Gone? I echoed. She nodded slowly. I had to pay something off. A loan. I repeated her word, calm but deadly. A loan. She opened her mouth, but her expression already betrayed her. It wasn't a loan. She had spent it on him. My gut turned cold and everything inside me hardened. I stepped back, nodding. Okay. Fine. She looked puzzled. Fine. Yeah, I repeated. Keep the money. Her eyes widened. Wait, seriously? I gave her another cold smile. Absolutely. Keep it. I turned around and walked away. Her voice followed, rising with confusion. What does that even mean? What are you going to do? I looked back at her once. You'll see soon enough. Then I walked away. She didn't know that she had just lost everything. As I made my way back to the car, my thoughts were sharper than they had been in weeks. The fury was still there, but now it had focus, a target. Ariella had betrayed me, stolen from me, and spent the money on the very man she'd lied about. She thought she had one. She had no idea what was coming. Joel got into the passenger seat, giving me a look like he couldn't tell whether I was about to unravel or carry out the most genius plan imaginable. He clicked his seatbelt and said, "Okay, that was unexpected. You just told her to keep the money." I smirked as I gripped the wheel and backed out of the driveway. "Oh yeah, she can have the money. I'm taking everything else." Joel let out a soft whistle. "All right, now I'm curious." I shot one final glance at the apartment through the rearview mirror as we drove away. Ariella believed she was in control, but she was overlooking the details. That apartment? I'm still on the lease. The car she drives? I paid for half. Every single piece of furniture, every monthly bill, those were all mine. Joel leaned back, nodding slowly. "So, what's your move?" I smiled. "I'm cutting her off completely. When I'm done, she won't have a car to drive, a bed to sleep in, or a single dollar in her account." Joel chuckled under his breath. "That's savage. I love it." Before we even left the neighborhood, I made my first move. I called the leasing office even though it was already closed for the evening. I left a message, "This is Orson Levitt. I need to update the lease details on my apartment. Please return my call first thing tomorrow." Next, I opened my banking app and navigated to the joint account settings. Keeping our finances combined had been foolish, but it played to my advantage now. I still had total control. I moved every dollar left into my personal account. The joint balance? 0. Joel peeked at my screen. Man, she's going to freak out. But I wasn't finished yet. I logged into the auto insurance portal and took her off the policy. If she got pulled over, she'd find out the hard way she had no coverage. That wasn't my concern anymore. I didn't stop there. The utilities, electric, water, internet were all in my name. A few quick forms and clicks later, disconnection notices were scheduled. She'd still be in that trendy little apartment, but by nightfall, there would be no power, no running water, and nothing she could do about it. Best part? She wouldn't realize it until it was far too late. Joel laughed softly as I finally put my phone down. Man, you're ice cold. I stared out at the quiet road ahead, exhaling. She took $4,000 and spent it on him. If her goal was to leave me feeling powerless, she really didn't think this through. Joel shook his head with a grin. I gotta say, man, you're handling this better than most would. I wasn't so sure about that. My chest still ached as if my heart had been ripped out and a heavy knot twisted in my stomach. Deep down, I knew the worst part hadn't even arrived. She still hadn't returned my call. The silence on her end was unsettling. It only meant one thing: she was scheming something, too. The only question was whether she sensed the storm brewing before it hit. I seriously doubted it. When morning arrived, the first domino tipped. My phone began to buzz violently on the wooden nightstand in Joel's guest room, the sound jarring like an unexpected alarm. I hadn't managed much sleep, but the moment I spotted the name flashing across the screen, my exhaustion vanished. It was Ariella. I didn't rush to answer. I let her wait, let the suspense build. When I finally picked up, I didn't speak right away. I just held the phone to my ear. The silence lingered until I heard a sharp intake of breath. You cut me off," she blurted out, her voice riddled with panic. "The utilities, the bank account, what did you do?" Leaning back, a subtle grin played on my lips. "Oh, so you figured it out," I replied, letting the words hang. Her breath trembled as she spoke again. "Orson, I need you to fix this. I can't pay my rent and my car's useless without insurance. Please." I absorbed every word. Just days ago, I had been the one gasping for air, left alone while she enjoyed drinks and laughter with someone else. Now the tables had turned. "You probably should have thought about all of this before you decided to take what wasn't yours," I said with measured calm. There was a brief silence. Then her tone shifted, softening, almost pleading. "Orson, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. I had waited to hear those words. I had yearned for them. But now that they were finally spoken, they felt hollow. She wasn't apologizing for the betrayal or the broken trust, she regretted being exposed. "I'm not coming back, Ariella," I said, my voice steady and firm. "This is over." She whispered, "But where am I supposed to go?" That was no longer my concern. I said nothing more, letting the silence stretch between us until she ended the call. From the kitchen, Joel appeared with a cup of coffee, having overheard the exchange. "Man, that was ice cold," he remarked, stepping closer. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. "Didn't feel as good as I thought it would." He placed the coffee in front of me and gave a small nod. "That's how you know you're still one of the good ones." "And good guys? They rise again." I stared at the coffee's steam curling upward, letting his words sink in. Maybe I hadn't won, not yet. But at least I wasn't on the losing end anymore. And for the moment, that was enough.